My grandmother said, "You'll never be part of this family if you keep living like that," then left me everything in her will. The call came at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. My grandmother had died in her sleep. I hadn't spoken to her in 3 years. Not since I'd moved in with my boyfriend Devin against her wishes. She'd made it very clear. Traditional marriage or nothing. No gray areas in her world. The funeral was awkward. My parents barely looked at me. My uncle refused to shake my hand. My aunt whispered something to my cousin that made them both glare. Apparently, living with someone before marriage was still the ultimate family disgrace, even in 2024. I sat in the back row, wondering why I'd even come. Then the lawyer read the will. Everything went silent. The brownstone in Brooklyn worth $2.3 million. The investment accounts, the antique jewelry collection, the stock portfolio my grandfather had built in the 60s, all of it. To me, my mother actually gasped. My uncle stood up so fast his chair fell backward. "This is a mistake," Dad said. His voice shook. She was confused at the end. Dementia. The lawyer adjusted his glasses. "Mrs. Rothman updated this will 6 weeks ago. She was evaluated by 2 physicians. Completely sound mind." I sat frozen while my family exploded. Accusations flew. They'd been the good children, the obedient ones. They'd visited every Sunday while I'd been living in sin. How could she reward my disrespect? That night, I found a letter in the manila envelope the lawyer handed me, her handwriting, shaky but clear. "Dearest Willow," it began. "By now, they're furious. Good. Let me tell you something I never told anyone. When I was 19, I fell in love with a jazz musician named Raymond. Your grandfather was already courting me, but Raymond made me feel alive. We planned to run away together. Then I got pregnant. My hands trembled. My grandmother had never mentioned any of this. My parents forced me to marry your grandfather. Raymond left town. I spent 54 years in a marriage I didn't choose, watching my dreams disappear. I became exactly what they wanted. The perfect wife, the perfect grandmother. I enforced every rule they'd used to trap me, and I watched you grow up." The letter continued. "When you moved in with Devin, I said those terrible things because that's what my mother would have said. But after you left, I couldn't stop thinking. You did what I never could. You chose your own path. You chose yourself." I wiped my eyes, smudging the ink slightly. "This money is my apology. But more than that, it's your freedom. Don't waste it being who they want you to be. I wasted my entire life. Don't waste yours. P.S. Check the safety deposit box. Key is in the blue velvet bag. Box 847 at First National." The next morning, I went to the bank. Inside box 847, I found letters. Dozens of them. All addressed to Raymond Carter in New Orleans. All returned, unopened, marked, address unknown. Letters my grandmother had written for decades, trying to find him. The last one was dated 3 months before she died. Underneath the letters was a birth certificate. Not mine. Someone named James Raymond, born 9 months before my grandmother married my grandfather. Given up for adoption the day he was born. My grandmother had another child, a son no one knew about. And according to the lawyer's business card tucked inside the certificate, someone had been making inquiries about accessing my grandmother's estate records 6 weeks ago, right when she updated her will. Someone else knew about James. Someone who might want a piece of that $2.3 million. And I had no idea who was coming for it. The lawyer's name was printed on the card. Gerald Hutchins. I'd never heard of him. The card belonged to a different firm than the one that had handled the will reading. I called the number immediately. "Hutchins and Associates," a receptionist answered. "I need to speak with Gerald Hutchins. It's about the Rothman estate." A pause. "Mr. Hutchins is with a client. May I ask who's calling?" "Willow Rothman. I'm the primary beneficiary." Another pause. Longer this time. "Please hold." I waited 3 minutes. Then a man's voice came on, smooth and careful. "Ms. Rothman, I was wondering when you'd call. Who hired you to look into my grandmother's records?" "I'm afraid that's confidential. Someone's trying to contest the will." "Not exactly," he said. "My client was simply establishing certain facts. Family history can be complicated." "James Raymond," I said. "That's who you were researching." Silence. Then, "I think we should meet. Are you available this afternoon?" I should have said no. Should have consulted with my own lawyer first. But I needed answers. "Where?" "My office. 2 p.m. Come alone." He hung up before I could respond. Devin found me sitting on our bedroom floor, surrounded by the letters. "What's going on?" I told him everything. About the will, the letters, the secret son. His face went pale. "Willow, this sounds dangerous. Someone's been planning this for weeks. I have to know who it is." "Then I'm coming with you." He said come alone. I don't care what he said. Devin grabbed his jacket. "Someone's after $2.3 million. You're not walking into that by yourself." Hutchins and Associates occupied the 3rd floor of a converted warehouse in Red Hook. The elevator creaked. The hallway smelled like old coffee and printer toner. Not exactly the offices of a successful law firm. The receptionist was a woman in her 50s with gray hair pulled into a tight bun. She looked us over. "Ms. Rothman?" "Yes. And you are?" She looked at Devin. "With her." Mr. Hutchins said alone. Then Mr. Hutchins can deal with both of us or neither of us. She picked up her phone, whispered something, then nodded toward a door. "Go ahead." The office was small. Cramped bookcases lined 3 walls. Gerald Hutchins sat behind a desk covered in file folders and legal pads. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with tired eyes and a coffee stain on his tie. "Ms. Rothman?" He didn't stand. "I see you brought company. This is Devin. He stays." Hutchins shrugged. "Suit yourself. Please, sit." We sat in 2 chairs that probably came from a yard sale. Devin's hand found mine. "Let's be direct," Hutchins said. 6 weeks ago, a man named Thomas Whitmore hired me to research your grandmother's past, specifically to find documentation of a child she gave birth to in 1951. James Raymond. Yes, Mr. Whitmore claimed to be James Raymond's son, your grandmother's grandson. He wanted to know if he had any legal claim to her estate. My stomach dropped. And Legally? No. Your grandmother's will is ironclad. She was evaluated, declared competent, and made her wishes crystal clear. But Mr. Whitmore wasn't interested in legal channels. What does that mean? Hutchins leaned forward. It means he hired me to do research, but fired me when I told him contesting the will would be futile. That was 3 weeks ago. I haven't heard from him since. Why did you leave your card in the safety deposit box? I didn't. His face was serious now. I never had access to that box. Your grandmother must have put it there. She wanted you to find me. Why? Because she knew Thomas Whitmore wouldn't stop, and she wanted you to be prepared. Devin squeezed my hand harder. Prepared for what? For whatever he's planning. Hutchins pulled out a folder. Your grandmother came to see me 5 weeks ago, right after Whitmore fired me. She told me everything. About Raymond Carter. About giving up her baby. About how she'd been trying to find James Raymond for 50 years. Then, suddenly, James's son appears, claiming his father died last year, and left him documents proving his lineage. Documents. Letters. Hospital records. Photos. According to Whitmore, James Raymond spent his whole life searching for his birth mother. He found her 6 months before he died, but he never contacted her, just watched from a distance. I thought of my grandmother, writing those letters, never knowing her son had found her, had watched her. Why didn't he reach out? Whitmore said his father didn't want to disrupt her life. He'd read about the Rothman family in society pages, knew she'd built a respectable life. He watched her at the grocery store, at church, at family events. He saw you too. The room felt smaller. He watched me. Your grandmother became obsessed with the idea that he'd seen her as a disappointment. She updated her will immediately, left everything to you with explicit instructions that no other heirs could claim the estate. She was protecting me from Whitmore. Yes, but there's more. Hutchins opened the folder. Inside was a photocopy of a photograph. A man in his 60s standing outside my grandmother's brownstone. He had her eyes, her nose. This is James Raymond, taken 2 years before he died. I stared at the face of the uncle I'd never known existed. And this, Hutchins pulled out another photo, is Thomas Whitmore. The man in the second photo was maybe 35, tall, dark hair, sharp features, and angry eyes, the kind of eyes that held grudges. Your grandmother was terrified of him, Hutchins said quietly. She met with him once, at his request. He demanded money, called it his birthright. She refused and he threatened her, said he'd destroy everything she'd built, expose her secrets, ruin her family's name. Did she call the police? No, she was too ashamed, too afraid of what her children would think, so she came to me instead. To do what? To give you this. He handed me a thick envelope. Everything I found about Thomas Whitmore, where he lives, where he works, his criminal history, and a warning. He's been arrested 3 times for fraud, twice for assault. He's desperate and dangerous. Your grandmother wanted you to know what you're dealing with. I opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside were police reports, court documents, credit records. Thomas Whitmore was drowning in debt. $340,000 owed to various creditors, eviction notices, gambling problems. He'd been fired from his last 3 jobs. He needs that money, I whispered. Badly, Hutchins agreed. And he knows he can't get it legally, so he's going to try something else. Like what? I don't know, but your grandmother wanted you warned. She also wanted you to have this. He handed me another envelope, sealed with red wax. My name was written on it in her handwriting. I broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Willow, it read. If you're reading this, I'm gone. Thomas Whitmore is James's son, but he's nothing like his father. James was kind, gentle. He used to sit on the bench across from the brownstone and sketch the building. I found one of his drawings after he died. He'd written on the back, I hope she's happy here. He was a good man who deserved better. His son is not. Be careful. Trust Gerald. And remember, you don't owe this family anything. Not your parents, not your uncle, and certainly not Thomas Whitmore. You owe yourself a life. Don't let them take it. Love, Grandma. I couldn't speak. Devin read over my shoulder, his breath warm against my neck. She died 3 days after writing that, Hutchins said softly. Heart attack in her sleep. Natural causes according to the autopsy. But I've always wondered, you think Whitmore killed her? I think the timing is convenient, and I think you need to be very careful. We left Hutchins's office with the envelope tucked under my arm. The afternoon sun felt too bright. My head pounded. We should go to the police, Devin said. And tell them what? A man might be planning something? We don't have proof. We have his criminal history, which shows he's a con artist, not a murderer. Devin stopped walking. Willow, listen to yourself. Your grandmother dies right after refusing to give this guy money. That's not a coincidence. The autopsy said natural causes. Autopsies can miss things. I knew he was right, but I also knew the police wouldn't do anything without evidence. And evidence was exactly what I didn't have. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered it anyway. Willow Rothman? A man's voice. Not Hutchins. Who is this? A friend. Someone who wants to help you. I don't need help. You will. Thomas Whitmore isn't working alone. My blood went cold. What? Meet me tonight, 9:30 p.m., the coffee shop on 5th and Union. Come alone this time. Who are you? Someone who knew your Uncle James. Someone who knows what Whitmore is planning. If you want to stop him, you'll come. The line went dead. Devin was staring at me. What was that? Someone who says Whitmore isn't working alone. This is insane. We're going to the police. After I meet with this person. Willow. Devin. Someone knew James. Someone knows what's happening. I have to find out. Then I'm coming with you. He said alone. I don't care. I'm not letting you walk into another trap. We fought about it for an hour. Finally, Devin agreed to wait outside the coffee shop, close enough to intervene if something went wrong, far enough to not scare off whoever was coming. The coffee shop was nearly empty when I arrived at 8:55 p.m., a couple in the corner sharing a laptop, a college student with headphones, a barista wiping down tables. I ordered a black coffee I didn't want and sat by the window where Devin could see me. At exactly 9 p.m., a woman walked in. She was maybe 60, with silver hair and sharp cheekbones. She wore an expensive coat and carried herself like someone who was used to being obeyed. She sat down across from me without asking. Willow Rothman, you're the one who called? I'm Patricia Reynolds. I was James Raymond's neighbor for 15 years. I'm also the person who told Thomas Whitmore about his grandmother. My hands clenched around the coffee cup. You're working with him? Not anymore. She pulled off her gloves slowly, deliberately. Thomas came to me 6 months ago. Said he was researching his father's past. I told him about James's obsession with finding his birth mother, about the box of documents James kept, letters, photos, adoption papers. Thomas promised he just wanted to know his family history, but that wasn't true. No. After James died, Thomas had been going through his father's belongings and found the documents. He came to me because he knew I'd helped James research. I was a genealogist before I retired. I didn't realize he was planning to extort money from an old woman. How did you find out? Thomas bragged about it to his girlfriend. She got scared and called me, told me everything. By then it was too late. Your grandmother had already died. You think he killed her? Patricia's eyes met mine. I think James died of a heart attack at 69. I think your grandmother died of a heart attack at 86. And I think Thomas Whitmore is very good at making stressful situations for people with heart conditions. That's not proof. No, but it's a pattern. And I think you're next on the list. The coffee cup slipped from my hands. Brown liquid spread across the table. The barista looked over, concerned. Next? Thomas is planning something for the reading of your grandmother's personal effects. It's scheduled for next week. He's going to be there. How? He's not family. He has a lawyer, one who specializes in estate disputes. They're claiming James Raymond was never legally adopted, that the birth certificate proves he's your grandmother's biological son. They're going to argue for a share of the estate based on genetic rights. Hutchins said that wouldn't work. It won't. But that's not the real plan. The lawyer is a distraction. While everyone's focused on the legal argument, Thomas is going to steal the jewelry collection. I stared at her. What? Your grandmother's jewelry is worth $800,000. It's being held in a secure facility until the personal effects reading. Thomas has connections with the security company. He's planning to switch the real pieces with fakes during the chaos of the legal challenge. That's insane. That's Thomas. He's been planning this for months. The legal challenge will fail, but by the time anyone realizes the jewelry's been swapped, he'll be long gone. Why are you telling me this? Patricia's expression softened. Because James was a good man. He didn't deserve a son like Thomas. And your grandmother didn't deserve to die afraid. James used to talk about her constantly. Wondered what she was like, if she thought about him, if she regretted giving him up. He loved her without ever meeting her. That kind of love deserves to be honored. What do you want me to do? Stop him. The reading is in 6 days. Find a way to protect the jewelry. And watch your back. Thomas knows you met with Hutchins today. How? He has someone following you. A private investigator named Lenny Costa. Drives a gray Honda Civic. Been tailing you since the funeral. I thought about the gray car I'd noticed behind us earlier. Thought it was paranoia. Costa reports everything to Thomas. Where you go? Who you meet? He knows about Devin. Knows about this meeting. But he doesn't know what we're discussing. I made sure we weren't close enough for him to hear. Where is he now? Parked across the street. Blue jacket. Sitting behind the wheel. I glanced out the window. Sure enough, a gray Civic. A man in a blue jacket behind the wheel. Watching. What happens if I can't stop Thomas? Patricia stood up. Then he gets away with $800,000 of jewelry and a murder. Maybe 2, if you're not careful. She pulled on her gloves. I've told you everything I know. The rest is up to you. She walked out without looking back. I sat frozen, watching Costa watch me. Devin appeared beside my table 30 seconds later. Who was that? Someone who just made everything worse. I told him everything on the walk back to our apartment. About the jewelry theft. About Costa following us. About Thomas's plan. Devin's face got darker with every word. We're going to the police right now. With what? Patricia's story? She has no proof. And even if they believe us, what are they going to do? Arrest Thomas for planning a crime? That's not how it works. So what, we just let him steal $800,000? No, we stop him ourselves. Devin grabbed my arm, making me face him. Willow, this isn't a movie. This is a dangerous criminal who might have killed your grandmother. We are not playing vigilante. Then what do you suggest? We hire security for the reading. We tell the facility about the threat. We let professionals handle it. And if that doesn't work, then at least we tried through the proper channels. He was right. I knew he was right. But I also knew that Thomas Whitmore had been planning this for months. He had inside connections. He had resources. Warning the facility might just make him change his plan to something worse. Fine, I said. We'll try it your way first. We called the facility the next morning. The manager, a woman named Diane Kruger, sounded skeptical. You're saying someone's planning to steal items during the reading? Yes, I have information that... Do you have evidence? Not physical evidence, but... Then I can't increase security based on speculation. We have standard protocols in place. They're more than adequate. This person has connections with your security company. I find that highly unlikely. Our security staff is thoroughly vetted. Please just check your employee records. See if anyone has connections to Thomas Whitmore. A long sigh. I'll look into it, but I'm not making any promises. She hung up. Devin looked at me. See? She's taking it seriously. She sounded like she thought I was crazy. She said she'd look into it. I didn't argue, but I knew we were on our own. The next 3 days crawled by. I researched Thomas Whitmore obsessively. Found his social media accounts, all privacy locked. Found an old mugshot from an arrest in Florida. Found a failed business venture that had cost investors $200,000. Everything confirmed what I already knew. He was desperate, dangerous, and about to become $800,000 richer. I also found the private investigator. Lenny Costa had a website advertising surveillance services. Starting rate, $500 a day, which meant Thomas was spending thousands just to watch me. That kind of investment meant he was serious. Devin caught me at 2:09 a.m. staring at my laptop in the dark. You need to sleep. I need to figure out how he's planning to switch the jewelry. The facility will handle it. Will they? Because I called Diane again today. She said she reviewed the security staff and found nothing suspicious. She basically told me to stop bothering her. Devin sat down beside me. What are you thinking? I'm thinking we need a plan B. What kind of plan B? The kind where we show up to that reading with our own security. Someone who can watch for the switch. Someone who can stop Thomas if he tries anything. Where are we going to find someone like that? I don't know, but we have 3 days to figure it out. The answer came from an unexpected place. The next morning, my mother called. First time since the funeral. Willow, Mom, we need to talk about your grandmother's jewelry. Of course. That's why she was calling. What about it? It should be divided among the family, not just kept by you. The will says it all goes to me. The will says the estate goes to you. The jewelry was separate. It belonged to our side of the family long before your grandmother married into it. That's not true. It is true. Those pieces came from my great-grandmother. They should come back to us. Mom, I'm not fighting about this. Then agree to share it. It's the right thing to do. I'll think about it. Willow? I hung up, but the call gave me an idea. If my family was fighting about the jewelry, they'd be watching the reading closely. And if they were watching, maybe I could use that. I called my uncle. He answered on the 5th ring. What do you want? I want to propose a deal. No deals? You stole our inheritance. Someone's planning to steal the jewelry. Silence. Then, what are you talking about? I told him about Thomas Whitmore, about the planned theft, about Costa following me. I left out the part about Thomas possibly killing Grandma. Uncle Paul wouldn't believe that, but he'd believe someone was after money. So you want me to do what exactly? Be there at the reading. Watch for anything suspicious. If Thomas tries something, you'll be close enough to stop him. Why would I help you? Because if the jewelry gets stolen, none of us get anything. It'll be tied up in insurance claims for years. But if we stop the theft, Mom's right. The jewelry should be shared among the family. You're saying you'll split it? I'm saying we can discuss it after we make sure it doesn't get stolen. Another pause. Fine. I'll be there. But if you're lying about this, I'm not. He hung up without saying goodbye. Devin stared at me. You just promised to give up $800,000 worth of jewelry. I promised to discuss it. Big difference. Willow? We need people watching. My uncle's an asshole, but he's observant. And he's motivated. He'll notice if something's wrong. And if Thomas realizes you've got people watching him, then he backs off, which is exactly what we want. Devin didn't look convinced, but he didn't argue. We spent the next 2 days preparing. I memorized every photo of Thomas Whitmore I could find, studied Patricia's description of his lawyer, made a list of everyone who'd be at the reading. The day before the reading, I got another call. Unknown number again. Willow Rothman? Who is this? Costa. The guy who's been following you. My heart stopped. What do you want? To give you a heads up. Thomas knows you talked to Patricia Reynolds. He knows you're planning something. Why are you telling me? Because I'm done working for that psychopath. He hasn't paid me in 2 weeks, and I don't get involved in theft. I signed up for surveillance, not crime. So what now? Now I'm getting out of town. But I wanted to warn you. Thomas knows you'll have people watching tomorrow. He's changed his plan. To what? I don't know. He stopped telling me details. But whatever it is, it's happening during the reading, not after. Be careful. The line went dead. Devin found me sitting on the floor of our bedroom. What happened? Costa called. Thomas knows we're onto him. That's good, right? Maybe he'll call it off. No, he's just changing the plan, and we don't know what the new plan is. Then we don't go tomorrow. We have to go. I'm the primary beneficiary. If I'm not there, the reading gets postponed, and that gives Thomas more time to plan. Willow, this is getting too dangerous. I know, but we're in it now. We can't back out. The reading was scheduled for 2 p.m. at the Secure Assets Facility in Manhattan. We arrived at 1:45 p.m. My uncle was already there, standing by the entrance like a bouncer. My mother was with him, so was my aunt, and my cousin. The whole family had shown up. Mom saw me and marched over. You told the whole family someone's planning to steal the jewelry. Because someone is. And you think we're going to believe this convenient story right after you inherited everything? Believe what you want. Just pay attention during the reading. Diane Kruger appeared, looking harassed. If everyone could please come inside. We're ready to begin. The viewing room was smaller than I expected. A long table in the center with 6 chairs. Glass cases along the walls. Empty for now. Everything was white. Sterile. Like a hospital. Diane stood at the head of the table. The personal effects of Mrs. Ruth Rothman are stored in our vault. We'll bring them out one section at a time. Please do not touch anything unless explicitly told you may. Photography is not permitted. Any questions? My uncle raised his hand. What about security? 2 guards are posted outside the vault at all times. The room is monitored by 6 cameras, and I'll be present throughout the viewing. Is that sufficient? I guess. Diane left to retrieve the first section. The moment she was gone, my family turned on me. This is ridiculous, Dad said. You've always been dramatic. Someone's been following me for days. You probably just noticed the same car twice and made up a whole conspiracy theory. I met with the man's neighbor. She told me everything. This mysterious neighbor who conveniently knows all about a theft that hasn't happened yet? My aunt sneered. How convenient. Devin squeezed my hand under the table. Let's just get through this. Diane returned wheeling a cart. On it were 3 jewelry boxes, velvet-covered and ornate. She opened the first one. Inside were emerald earrings, a sapphire necklace, and a diamond bracelet. Even from across the table, I could see them sparkle. These pieces were appraised at $240,000 collectively, Diane said. They've been in the Rothman family since 1952. My mother was crying. I remember when she wore those emeralds to my wedding. The second box held rings. 7 of them, each worth more than my annual salary. The third box had brooches and pins, including one shaped like a hummingbird that was my grandmother's favorite. Diane wheeled the cart back out. I'll retrieve the next section. That's when I noticed it. A man in a security uniform standing by the door. He'd appeared while we were all focused on the jewelry. Tall, dark hair, sharp features. Thomas Whitmore. I stood up so fast my chair fell over. That's him. Everyone turned. Thomas smiled. The guard beside him looked confused. Ma'am, this is Officer Reynolds. He's been working here for 3 months. His name isn't Reynolds. It's Whitmore. And he's here to steal the jewelry. Thomas's smile widened. I think you're confused. I've seen your photo. You're James Raymond's son. I don't know what you're talking about. Diane, check his employee records. His real name is Thomas Whitmore. Diane looked between us, uncertain. Officer Reynolds has excellent credentials. He passed our background check. Under a fake name. Call the police right now. I think you need to calm down, Thomas said. His hand moved to his belt, to his radio. I'll call for assistance. Don't let him leave this room. My uncle stood up. What's going on? That man killed my grandmother. He's here to steal the jewelry. Thomas's expression changed. The smile vanished. Something cold and calculating replaced it. You can't prove any of that. I have witness statements. I have your criminal record. He moved fast, crossed the room in 3 steps and grabbed Diane, one arm around her throat. The other hand pulled out a knife from somewhere. The blade pressed against her jugular. Everyone sit down. Now. The room erupted. My mother screamed. My uncle lunged forward and Thomas pressed the knife harder. A thin line of blood appeared on Diane's neck. I said sit down. We sat. Devin tried to pull me back, but I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Here's what's going to happen, Thomas said calmly. You're all going to stay quiet, and I'm going to walk out of here with what I came for. The jewelry's in the vault, I said. You can't reach it. You're right. I can't. He gestured toward the door behind him. It opened. A woman walked in wearing scrubs. She had a cart identical to Diane's, but the jewelry boxes on this cart were empty. Meet my associate, Thomas said. She's been working in the medical office 3 floors down. Easy enough to fake credentials and rent space in this building. No one checks too carefully at a place like this. The cameras are recording you, my uncle said. Recording Officer Reynolds subduing a violent visitor while his colleague assists an emergency situation? That's what it'll look like. By the time anyone reviews the footage, we'll be gone. And the real jewelry will be right here on this cart, hidden in the false bottom. The woman in scrubs moved to where Diane had left the cart with the real jewelry. She worked quickly, efficiently, transferring pieces into the false bottom of her cart. The whole process took maybe 90 seconds. Perfect, Thomas said. Now, we're all going to wait here for exactly 10 minutes. That'll give us time to get downstairs and out of the building. If anyone moves before then, Diane gets a second smile. Understood? Nobody spoke. The woman in scrubs rolled her cart toward the door. That's when Devin moved. He didn't go for Thomas. That would have gotten Diane killed. Instead, he went for the cart, grabbed it, yanking it away from the woman in scrubs. Jewelry boxes crashed to the floor, spilling precious stones across white tile. Thomas shoved Diane away and lunged for Devin. The knife flashed. Devin dodged, barely, and the blade caught his shoulder instead of his throat. Blood bloomed across his shirt. My uncle finally moved. He crashed into Thomas from the side, and they both went down. The knife skittered across the floor. I dove for it, grabbed it, and held it up with shaking hands. Don't move. Thomas was pinned under my uncle. The woman in scrubs ran for the door. My cousin tripped her. She went down hard, her head hitting the edge of the table with a crack. Diane was gasping, hands at her throat, but alive. Mom was calling 911. Dad was trying to stop Devin's bleeding with his jacket. Thomas looked up at me. You can't prove anything. It's your word against mine. There are 6 cameras in this room. Footage can be edited, deleted. My lawyer is very good. Your lawyer can explain it to the police. Sirens wailed outside, getting closer. Thomas's expression never changed. This isn't over. Yeah, I said. It is. The police arrested Thomas and the woman in scrubs, whose real name was Angela Pitt. She'd been working with him for 2 years, running similar cons across 3 states. Devin needed 12 stitches in his shoulder, but the knife had missed anything vital. Diane had a minor cut that required bandaging and probably years of therapy. My family stayed through the whole ordeal, giving statements, helping clean up the jewelry. My uncle even apologized, sort of. I guess you weren't being dramatic. I guess not. Mom hugged me for the first time in 3 years. I'm sorry I didn't believe you. It's okay. No, it's not. You were right about everything. And I was awful at the funeral. You were grieving. That's no excuse. She pulled back, tears on her face. Your grandmother was trying to tell us something with that will, that we'd been wrong, about you, about Devin, about everything. I just wasn't ready to hear it. Are you ready now? I'm trying to be. It took 3 hours to sort everything out. The jewelry was returned to the facility's vault, this time with actual security measures. Thomas and Angela were charged with attempted robbery, assault, and a dozen other crimes. Lenny Costa appeared at the police station voluntarily, offering to testify in exchange for immunity. He had recordings of Thomas planning the theft. Apparently, he'd been covering his own ass the whole time. Patricia Reynolds also came forward. She had James Raymond's documents. All of them. Letters he'd written but never sent. Photos of my grandmother taken from a distance. A journal where he'd recorded every moment he'd watched her. It was heartbreaking and beautiful and sad all at once. The police investigated my grandmother's death. The autopsy had ruled it natural causes, but under scrutiny there were questions. Thomas had visited her 3 days before she died. The doorman remembered him leaving her apartment looking angry. My grandmother had called her doctor the next day complaining of chest pains, but she'd refused to go to the hospital. 2 days later, she was dead. The DA couldn't prove murder. The stress of Thomas's visit might have triggered the heart attack, but that wasn't a crime. Not one they could prosecute. Thomas was looking at 10 to 15 years for the attempted theft. It would have to be enough. Devin and I went home that night exhausted. His shoulder hurt despite the pain medication. My head pounded from crying and adrenaline. We collapsed on the couch together. That was the worst day of my life, he said. You saved the jewelry. I got stabbed. You saved Diane's life. I got stabbed. I know, I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Just promise me something. What? No more family drama for at least a year. I need recovery time. I laughed. It felt good. Deal. The next few weeks were a blur of legal proceedings, insurance claims, and family dinners. My parents invited us over, then invited us again. Slowly, carefully, we started rebuilding something. Not the relationship we'd had before. Something different, something honest. My uncle stopped treating me like a criminal. My aunt stopped whispering. My cousin actually asked Devin about his shoulder and seemed genuinely concerned. The jewelry stayed in the vault while lawyers figured out the estate. My grandmother's will was clear, but the jewelry's history was complicated. My mother was right. Some pieces had come from her side of the family. After 3 mediation sessions, we reached an agreement. I kept 2/3. The rest was divided among my parents, uncle, and aunt. Everyone walked away with something. More importantly, everyone walked away speaking to each other. I found James Raymond's son, not Thomas, the real James Raymond Jr., who'd been raised by Raymond Carter's sister in New Orleans. He was 68, a retired music teacher, and completely shocked to learn about his half-brother Thomas's crimes. I knew Dad gave up a child, he told me over the phone, but he never told me he'd found her. Never mentioned Thomas either. Thomas used your father's name to gain access. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. I'm the one who's sorry. Dad was a good man. He wouldn't want his name used like that. Would you like to meet? I have his journals, his photos, everything he collected about my grandmother. There was a long pause. I'd like that very much. We met at a cafe in New Orleans 2 months later. James Raymond Jr. looked just like his father. Same eyes, same gentle expression. He cried when I showed him the journals. He loved her, he whispered. All those years. She loved him too. She never stopped looking. What a waste. They could have had 50 years together. Instead, they had this. I gestured to the journals. It's not nothing. No, I suppose it's not. James Raymond Jr. didn't want any money, didn't want the jewelry. He just wanted the journals and photos. These are my inheritance, he said. These memories of a father who loved deeply enough to watch from a distance. That's worth more than any brownstone. I gave him everything. The letters, the photos, the journal. He left New Orleans carrying a box full of memories and a connection to the family he'd never known. Devin proposed 3 months after the attempted robbery. We were eating takeout on our couch. His shoulder finally healed, when he suddenly got down on one knee. I know this is supposed to be romantic, he said, but I got stabbed for you, and I'd do it again. So will you marry me? I laughed and cried and said yes. My grandmother's brownstone sold for $2.4 million. I donated half to a foundation supporting adopted children searching for their birth family. The other half went into investments. Safe, stable, the kind of future my grandfather would have approved of. Devin and I bought a smaller place in Queens, 2 bedrooms, a tiny yard, room for the life we wanted to build. My mother stood in our new living room the day we moved in. She would have been proud, she said quietly. Your grandmother, she would have been so proud. Of the house? Of you, for choosing yourself, for not letting us pressure you into a life you didn't want. She wiped her eyes. I spent 40 years doing everything my mother wanted. It made me miserable, and I almost made you miserable too. You were doing what you thought was right. I was doing what was easy, what was expected. There's a difference. She hugged me tight. Thank you for being braver than I was. The wedding was small, just family and close friends. We held it in the backyard of our new house. Devin's shoulder had a nasty scar, but he wore his suit jacket unbuttoned anyway. Battle scar, he joked. Proves I'm tough. My uncle gave a toast to Willow and Devin, who taught this family that love isn't about following rules. It's about showing up when it matters. My mother cried through the ceremony, happy tears this time. And I wore my grandmother's emerald earrings, the ones she'd worn to my parents' wedding, the ones Thomas had tried to steal. They were heavy against my earlobes, a reminder of everything we'd fought for. 6 months after the wedding, I got a letter. The return address was a prison in upstate New York. Thomas Whitmore. Devin wanted to burn it without reading it. Don't give him the satisfaction. But I was curious. I opened it carefully. Willow, it began. No greeting. No pretense of civility. You think you won. You got the money, the house, the happy ending. But you stole it. Just like your grandmother stole my father's childhood. Just like your grandfather stole Raymond Carter's life. This family is built on theft, on secrets, on lies. You're no different than the rest of them. You just got lucky. Remember that every time you spend that money, every time you look at that jewelry, you're living on stolen time, stolen opportunities, stolen lives. One day you'll realize it. And when you do, remember I tried to take back what was ours. Remember I was the only one honest about what this family really is. Thieves, all of you. I read it twice. Then I did burn it. What did it say? Devin asked. Nothing important. You sure? I'm sure. But late that night I couldn't sleep. Thomas's words echoed in my head. Was he right? Had my grandmother stolen Raymond Carter's life by marrying someone else? Had my grandfather stolen James Raymond's childhood by forcing my grandmother into a marriage she didn't want? I thought about the journals, about Raymond watching from a distance, about James Raymond searching for his mother for 50 years, about my grandmother writing letters that would never be delivered. Everyone in this story had made choices. Some were forced, some were freely made, but they were all choices. And the consequences rippled out, touching lives decades later. My grandmother had chosen to give me her estate, not because I deserved it more than anyone else, but because she wanted me to have the freedom she'd never had, the freedom to choose, to make mistakes, to build a life on my own terms. Thomas was wrong. This wasn't about theft. It was about inheritance, not money or jewelry or brownstones, the inheritance of choice, The inheritance of freedom. The inheritance of being allowed to be fully, completely yourself without apology. That was what my grandmother had given me, and that was what I'd pass on. Devin found me at 3 a.m., sitting in our kitchen staring at nothing. Can't sleep? Just thinking. About Thomas. About my grandmother. About all the choices she never got to make. About the life she lived because she was forced into it. Devin sat down beside me. You're not her. I know. You chose me. You chose this life. Nobody forced you. I know that too. Then why are you sitting in the dark? Because I'm grateful. Because I almost let them take this away. My family, the rules, the expectations. I almost gave in. But you didn't. No, I didn't. He took my hand. Your grandmother knew you wouldn't. That's why she left you everything. She bet on you being stronger than she was. And she was right. We sat in the quiet dark holding hands. Outside, the city hummed with life. Millions of people making millions of choices. Some good, some bad. All of them leading somewhere. Devin and I had chosen each other. Chosen this tiny house in Queens. Chosen a life that made sense to us even if it confused everyone else. And we'd keep choosing. Every day. Every moment. That was the real inheritance. The freedom to choose. The courage to live with those choices. The strength to keep going even when it was hard. My grandmother had given me that. Not the money, not the jewelry, not the brownstone. She'd given me permission to be myself, to want different things, to make different choices, to live a different life. And I wasn't going to waste it. 6 months later, I found out I was pregnant. Devin cried when I told him. Happy tears. Terrified tears. The kind of tears that come when you realize your whole life is about to change. What if I'm a terrible father? He whispered. You won't be. What if I make the same mistakes my parents made? Then you'll apologize and do better. That's all anyone can do. We told my parents together. Mom cried. Dad actually smiled. A grandchild, he said, like he couldn't quite believe it. You're happy? I asked, surprised. Of course I'm happy. Why wouldn't I be? Because we're not married in a church. Because we're living together. Because none of that matters, Mom interrupted. What matters is you're happy and healthy and loved. That's all that ever mattered. We just forgot for a while. The baby came in early spring, a girl. We named her Ruth Raymond, after both of our grandmothers. Devin's middle name is Raymond. It felt right to honor them both. My mother was there when she was born. She held Ruth with shaking hands and wept. She looks just like you did. Those same eyes. She has Devin's nose. And your stubbornness, I bet. Definitely. I watched my mother with my daughter and thought about cycles, about patterns, about the things we inherit beyond money and jewelry and brownstones. Mom had inherited her mother's rigid expectations, had passed them on to me, but I'd broken the cycle. And maybe, just maybe, Ruth would inherit something different, something better, the freedom to choose, the courage to be herself, the knowledge that love isn't about obedience. It's about showing up, being present, supporting the people you care about even when they choose paths you don't understand. Thomas Whitmore was released after serving 8 years. I got a notification from the Victim Services Program. Devin wanted to move. What if he comes after us again? He won't. You don't know that. I know he's 53 years old and tired. I know he lost everything trying to get revenge on a dead woman. I know whatever anger drove him burned itself out in prison. I was right. Thomas never contacted us, never came near us. According to Lenny Costa, who'd stayed in touch, Thomas had moved to Florida, got a job at a hardware store, lived alone in a studio apartment. The fight had gone out of him. Sometimes I wondered what he thought about, if he ever regretted his choices, if he ever forgave his father for loving a woman from a distance instead of being present for his son, if he ever understood that some things can't be stolen because they were never really there to take. My grandmother's love for Raymond Carter wasn't something Thomas could claim. Neither was James Raymond's quiet devotion. Those weren't inheritances. They were gifts given freely, even if they were never received. Ruth turned 5 the year my mother got sick. Cancer. The same kind that had killed my grandmother. History repeating, Mom joked weakly from her hospital bed. Don't say that. Why not? It's true, I'm 62, she was 86. I'm getting the better deal. I held her hand. It felt small, fragile. You're going to be fine. Maybe, maybe not. But if I'm not, I need you to know something. Mom, listen, I wasted 20 years being angry at you for living your life. 20 years we could have spent actually knowing each other. I don't want Ruth to make the same mistake with you. She won't. You can't know that. Kids grow up. They make their own choices. Sometimes those choices hurt, but that doesn't mean they're wrong. She squeezed my hand. Let her be herself, even when it scares you, even when it hurts. Let her choose. I will. Promise me. I promise. Mom survived. The treatment worked. She came out of it weaker, but somehow stronger too. Like she'd shed something heavy she'd been carrying for years. She started coming over more, playing with Ruth, teaching her to bake, telling her stories about my grandmother. Not the perfect, distant woman from my childhood. The real woman. The one who'd loved jazz music and hated gardening and cried during sad movies. Your great-grandmother made mistakes, Mom told Ruth. She lived a life she didn't choose. But at the end, she tried to make it right. She gave your mama freedom, and that's the best thing anyone can give. Ruth listened with serious eyes. What did Mama do with her freedom? She chose your daddy. She chose this house. She chose you. That's good. That's everything. Devin and I celebrated our 10-year anniversary at the same cafe where I'd met Patricia Reynolds. It had changed ownership twice. The barista was new, but the table by the window was the same. Remember when you waited outside while I met with a mysterious stranger about my dead grandmother's secret baby? I said. Remember when I got stabbed trying to save your inheritance? Remember when we thought our lives were going to be normal? We both laughed. Our lives hadn't been normal. They'd been messy and complicated and occasionally dangerous. But they'd been ours. Every choice. Every consequence. Ours. I thought about my grandmother sometimes. wondered what she'd think of Ruth, of our little house in Queens, of the life I'd built with the money she'd left me. I thought she'd be happy, not because of what I'd bought or accomplished, but because I'd chosen, every day, every moment. I'd chosen this life, this family, this path, and that was all she'd ever wanted for me. The brownstone in Brooklyn had been converted into a community center. I'd donated it to a nonprofit that helped young women escaping abusive families. They offered housing, counseling, job training, everything my grandmother never had, everything she'd wished she'd had when she was 19 and pregnant and scared. We went to the grand opening. Ruth ran through the rooms, exclaiming over the high ceilings and the chandelier in the foyer. Devin took pictures. Mom cried naturally. The director gave a speech, thanked me for the donation, talked about the women who'd already found safety within those walls, mentioned my grandmother's name. Ruth Rothman lived in this house for 54 years, she said, and now it'll help other women build the lives they deserve, the lives they choose. That's a legacy worth inheriting. I thought about Thomas Whitmore, about his anger and his bitterness and his conviction that I'd stolen something from him. He'd been wrong. You can't steal freedom. You can't steal the right to choose. Those things have to be given. My grandmother had given them to me, and I was passing them on, to Ruth, to the women in the brownstone, to everyone who needed permission to choose themselves. That was the inheritance that mattered, not money or jewelry or real estate, the knowledge that you're allowed to want different things, to make different choices, to live a life that makes sense to you even if it confuses everyone else, and the courage to do it anyway. Ruth pulled on my hand. Mama, can we go inside? I want to see everything. Of course, sweetheart. We walked through the brownstone together, past the room where my grandmother had written letters to a man she'd loved and lost, past the kitchen where she'd made Sunday dinners for a family that didn't understand her, past the bedroom where she'd died, alone, with only her regrets for company. But the rooms didn't feel sad anymore. They felt alive, filled with hope and possibility and choice, filled with women who were writing their own stories, making their own choices, building their own lives. My grandmother would have loved that. The idea that her biggest regret had become someone else's greatest opportunity, that the cage she'd lived in was now a door opening outward. What do you think, Ruth? I asked. Pretty nice, right? It's beautiful, she said. Like a castle. Want to know a secret? Yeah. Your great-great-grandmother lived here, and she was kind of like a princess in a castle. Except she wasn't really happy. Why not? Because she didn't get to choose her castle. Someone chose it for her. Ruth thought about that. That's sad. It is. But you know what makes it better? What? Now lots of people get to choose. They get to decide what their castles look like, where they want to live, what they want to do, and that's because of her. Ruth smiled. So she's like a fairy godmother. Exactly like that. We left the brownstone as the sun was setting. The light caught the windows just right, making them glow gold. Like the building itself was happy, like it had finally found its purpose. Devin put his arm around me. Ruth skipped ahead, humming some song she'd learned at school. Mom walked beside us, quieter than usual. She'd be proud, Mom said softly. I know. I mean it. Of everything you've done, everything you've become. She'd be so proud. Are you? Mom stopped walking, looked at me with tears in her eyes. Yes. God, yes, I'm so proud I can barely breathe sometimes, even though I didn't follow the plan. Especially because you didn't follow the plan. You made your own plan, your own life, and it's beautiful. We stood there on the sidewalk in Brooklyn, 3 generations of women who'd learned the hard way that the most important thing you can give someone is permission to be themselves. Even when it's scary, even when it hurts, even when it means watching them walk away from everything you thought they should want. My grandmother had given me that gift at the end of her life. I was giving it to Ruth from the beginning of hers. And maybe that was how you break cycles, how you change patterns, how you turn inheritances into something worth having. Not by passing down money or jewelry or brownstones, but by passing down choice, freedom, the courage to be yourself even when the whole world tells you to be someone else. That was worth more than $2.3 million. Worth more than any amount of money. Worth everything. Ruth called back to us. Come on, I want ice cream. Devin laughed. Kid knows what she wants. Just like her mother, Mom said. Just like her great-grandmother, I corrected. We walked toward the ice cream shop, the 3 of us, with Ruth running ahead. The city moved around us, full of people making choices, living lives, building futures. And we were part of it. Fully. Completely. Without apology. My grandmother had said I'd never be part of the family if I kept living like that. And she'd been right, in a way. I'd never be part of the family she'd known, the one built on rules and expectations and obligation, the one that demanded conformity as the price of belonging. But I was part of something better, a family built on choice, on acceptance, on love that didn't come with conditions, a family that was still figuring itself out but trying, genuinely trying to do better. And that was an inheritance worth keeping, worth protecting, worth passing down to Ruth and anyone else who needed it. We got our ice cream, sat outside even though it was getting cold. Ruth got chocolate all over her face. Devin tried to take artistic photos of it. Mom laughed until she cried. And I thought about my grandmother one last time. Pictured her at 19, in love with a jazz musician, pregnant and scared and about to lose everything. Pictured her at 86, dying alone, writing letters to a dead man, leaving everything to the granddaughter who disappointed her. She'd lived 2 lives, one for everyone else, one, at the very end, for herself. The first life had been long and respectable and empty. The second life had lasted only a few weeks, but it had meant everything. She'd chosen me, chosen to give me what she'd never had, chosen to break the cycle even though it cost her everything. I'd make sure Ruth knew that story, make sure she understood that sometimes love looks like letting go. Sometimes family means supporting people even when they choose paths you don't understand. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give is permission to leave. My grandmother had been trapped her whole life, but in the end, she'd set me free. And I'd used that freedom well, built something real, something honest, something mine. That was her legacy. Not the money or the brownstone or the jewelry, the freedom she'd given me, the permission to choose, the courage to be myself, and I'd be damned if I'd waste it. Ruth finished her ice cream and leaned against me, sticky and tired and perfect. I love you, Mama. I love you too, sweetheart. Will I get to choose my castle when I grow up? You'll get to choose everything. Promise? Promise. And I meant it. Whatever Ruth wanted, wherever she went, however she chose to live, I'd support her, fight for her, give her the same freedom my grandmother had given me, because that's what inheritance should really mean, not possessions passed down through generations, but possibilities, opportunities, the knowledge that you're allowed to want different things. My grandmother had died giving me that gift. I'd spend the rest of my life making sure Ruth understood she already had it, from birth, from before birth, from the moment I'd decided to keep choosing myself, even when it was hard. That was love, that was family, that was everything. We walked home as the streetlights flickered on, Ruth between us holding both our hands, Mom trailing behind, still wiping her eyes and laughing at nothing, and somewhere, somehow, I felt my grandmother smiling, finally, at peace, finally free, finally knowing that her sacrifice hadn't been wasted. I'd built a life she never could, and someday, Ruth would build a life I couldn't imagine, and that would be perfect. That would be exactly right, because that's what freedom looks like, what inheritance really means, what love actually is, the courage to let go, the strength to choose, the wisdom to know that the best thing you can give someone is permission to be themselves. My grandmother had given me that, and I'd pass it on, generation after generation, until nobody remembered a time when women weren't allowed to choose. When love came with conditions, when family meant conformity or nothing, we'd build something better, starting with this messy, complicated, beautiful life. This family that was still learning how to love without controlling, how to support without demanding, how to be present without requiring conformity. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Every choice, every consequence, every moment. And that was worth more than any inheritance could ever be. My boyfriend said I was paranoid about his ex-girlfriend until I played their voice messages during his surprise party. For 8 months, Brennan had been gaslighting me about Valencia. Every time I mentioned her name, he'd roll his eyes and launch into the same speech about my insecurity. When she called during our movie nights, he'd step onto the balcony for quick conversations. When I found her earring in his car, he claimed it had been there since before we started dating. "You're becoming obsessive," he'd say, stroking my hair like I was a child having a tantrum. Valencia and I ended things completely. We barely even talk anymore. But I wasn't imagining the way she'd show up at his gym, or how she'd comment heart emojis on every single one of his Instagram posts, or the fact that she still had his Netflix password and was watching romantic comedies at 2 a.m. on his account. The breaking point came when I noticed his phone buzzing constantly during my birthday dinner. Voice message after voice message from Valencia. When I asked about it, Brennan snapped. "This jealousy is toxic," he said. "You're pushing me away with these constant accusations. Valencia is going through a tough time and needs support from her friends." That night, while he showered, I couldn't resist. I opened his phone and listened to the first voice message. "I can't stop thinking about yesterday afternoon." Valencia's breathy voice filled the bathroom. "The way you touched me against your kitchen counter while she was at work." My hands shook as I scrolled through dozens more. Months of evidence, their secret hotel meetings, how they laughed about my paranoia, plans for him to break up with me after his sister's wedding next month. His coworkers were throwing him a surprise promotion party at his apartment. They'd asked me to coordinate since I had his spare key. I volunteered enthusiastically. The night of the party, I arrived early with a Bluetooth speaker. While 20 people crowded into his bedroom and kitchen, I connected my phone and queued up Valencia's most incriminating voice messages. When Brennan walked through the door to thunderous shouts of "surprise," his grin dissolved instantly as Valencia's sultry voice echoed through his living room. "God, I love how we sneak around behind her back. Makes it so much hotter when you're inside me." The room fell silent. His boss's jaw dropped. His sister covered her mouth in horror. The messages played automatically. "I can't wait until you dump that clingy girlfriend. These hotel receipts are adding up, but you're worth every penny." Brennan lunged toward the speaker, but his best friend blocked him. "Dude, let it play out." Message after message exposed everything. Their ongoing affair throughout our entire relationship. Her fake pregnancy scared to manipulate him. Their detailed plans to humiliate me at his sister's wedding by announcing their engagement. But the final message shattered me. "The engagement ring you bought her? I switched it out when I was at your place yesterday. The real diamond is on my finger now. She'll be wearing a fake when she says yes." From his jacket pocket, Brennan pulled out the small box I'd seen him hide last week. The ring I'd been dreaming about. His sister started crying. "Brennan, how could you do this to her?" As guests filed out in awkward silence, the front door opened. Valencia walked in, wearing my engagement ring, surveying the devastation with a satisfied smile. "Perfect timing," she said. "I brought champagne to celebrate." I stared at her, my entire body trembling with rage. The woman who had destroyed my life stood there like she owned the place, holding a bottle of Dom Perignon and wearing the ring that was supposed to symbolize Brennan's love for me. "Celebrate what exactly?" Brennan's sister Meredith demanded, stepping between Valencia and me. "You just destroyed my brother's reputation in front of his entire company." Valencia shrugged, examining her manicured nails. The diamond caught the light, throwing sparkles across the wall like tiny knives. "I'm celebrating the end of this ridiculous charade. Brennan's been mine all along. Haven't you, baby?" She moved toward him, but he stepped back, his face pale with panic. "Valencia, what are you doing here? I told you to stay away tonight." "I got tired of hiding," she said, popping the champagne cork. Foam spilled onto his hardwood floors. "Besides, I wanted to see her face when she realized how stupid she's been." The remaining guests, Maybe 6 people who'd been too shocked to leave stood frozen like they were watching a car accident. Brennan's boss, a stern woman in her 50s, cleared her throat. "I think we should go," she said, eyeing Brennan with disgust. "This is clearly a personal matter." "Actually," I said, finding my voice for the first time since Valencia had walked in, "I think you should all stay. There's more to the story." I pulled out my phone again. During the past week, while planning this party, I'd done more than just collect voice messages. I'd been busy. You see, when I discovered their affair, I didn't just get angry. I got curious. Valencia here has been quite busy. Valencia's confident smile faltered slightly. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about your other boyfriends," I said, opening my photos. "Like Derek, the married doctor from your yoga class. Or Trevor, the guy who thinks you're saving yourself for marriage." I held up my phone, showing screenshots of Valencia's dating profiles. Multiple accounts, different photos, different stories. On one, she was a single mom looking for stability. On another, a virgin waiting for the right man. On a third, a successful businesswoman seeking a sugar daddy. "That's private information," Valencia sputtered, but her face was turning red. "So is stealing someone's engagement ring," Meredith shot back. I kept scrolling. "Here's where it gets interesting. Derek's been paying your rent for 6 months thinking you two are exclusive. Trevor bought you that BMW outside believing you're pure as snow. And Brennan here has been funding your shopping sprees while you plan your future together." Brennan's jaw dropped. "What shopping sprees?" "Valencia, I never gave you money for shopping." "No," I said, "but you did give her your credit card information. Remember when she said she needed to order dinner for you two, but her card was declined? Well, that was 3 months ago, and she's been using it ever since." I showed him my phone screen, his credit card statements that I'd photographed when I was digging through his office last week. Valencia had charged thousands in luxury purchases. Designer handbags, expensive jewelry, a weekend trip to Napa with someone who definitely wasn't Brennan. "You've been stealing from me?" Brennan's voice cracked. Valencia's mask was slipping completely now. "I wasn't stealing. We're going to be together. What's yours is mine. Except you're also sleeping with at least 3 other men," I continued, "including Derek, who happens to be married to Brennan's boss." The color drained from everyone's faces. Brennan's boss, Patricia, looked like she might faint. "That's right," I said, making eye contact with Patricia. "Your husband Derek has been having an affair with Valencia for 8 months. The same 8 months she's been manipulating my boyfriend. The same 8 months she's been conning Trevor into buying her a car." Patricia's hands started shaking. "Derek told me he was working late, all those nights. He was with Valencia at the Marriott downtown, room 412. Every Tuesday and Thursday." Valencia lunged for my phone, but I'd backed up everything to the cloud. Her desperate grab only made her look more guilty. "You psychotic bitch," Valencia hissed. "You've been stalking me." "I've been protecting myself," I corrected, "and uncovering the truth about who you really are." I turned to address the room. "Valencia Winters isn't even her real name. It's Carmen Rodriguez, and she's got a criminal record for fraud and identity theft in 3 states. That was the lie that broke everything open. Valencia's face contorted with rage, and she came at me with her champagne bottle raised. But I was ready. I'd been taking self-defense classes for 2 months, ever since I'd started planning this confrontation. When she swung, I ducked and grabbed her wrist, twisting until she dropped the bottle. It shattered across Brennan's floor, sending glass and champagne everywhere. "Get off me," Valencia screamed, trying to claw at my face. I held her arm firmly, the way my instructor had taught me. "Give me back my ring. It's mine. Brennan gave it to me." "Brennan," I said, not taking my eyes off Valencia. "Did you give her that ring?" His voice was barely a whisper. "No, I bought it for you." "Then it's stolen property," Patricia said, pulling out her phone. "I'm calling the police." Valencia's struggles became more frantic. "You can't prove anything." "Actually, I can." I reached into my purse with my free hand and pulled out a small device. "This is a digital recorder. I've been wearing it for the past month, recording every conversation we've had, including the one last week where you admitted to taking the ring and several other items from Brennan's apartment." The fight went out of Valencia completely. She slumped in my grip, finally understanding that her carefully constructed web of lies was collapsing. "You planned this," she said, her voice hollow. "I learned from the best," I replied. "You taught me that sometimes you have to be strategic to get what you deserve." Sirens wailed in the distance. Patricia must have called while Valencia and I were fighting. "I can't believe this," Brennan said, sinking onto his couch and putting his head in his hands. "I can't believe I fell for all of this." "You didn't fall for anything," his sister said gently. "You were manipulated by a professional con artist." The police arrived and took statements from everyone. Valencia was arrested for theft, fraud, and identity theft after they ran her real name through their system. Turns out she had outstanding warrants in 2 states. As they led her away in handcuffs, she looked back at me with pure hatred. "This isn't over," she spat. "Yes, it is," I said calmly. "Your life of lies just caught up with you." After the police left, the apartment was quiet except for the sound of Meredith sweeping up broken glass. Brennan sat on his couch, staring at the engagement ring box in his hands. "I don't even know what to say," he said finally. "There's nothing to say," I replied. "We're done. But I love you. Valencia manipulated me. I can see that now." I looked at him, really looked at him, for what felt like the first time in months. "Brennan, you didn't just fall for her manipulation. You chose to gaslight me instead of listening to my concerns. You made me feel crazy for trusting my instincts. That's not love." I was confused. "You were selfish," I interrupted. "Even if Valencia manipulated you, you still chose to lie to me. You still chose to make me feel like I was losing my mind. You still chose to plan a future with her behind my back. Meredith stopped sweeping and looked at her brother. She's right, Brennan. I watched you gaslight her for months. Valencia didn't make you do that. Brennan's face crumpled. Please don't leave me. I'll do anything to make this right. I walked over and gently took the ring box from his hands. This was never mine to begin with. The man I thought I loved would never have let things get this far. I headed toward the door, then turned back. Oh, and Brennan? You might want to check your credit report. Valencia charged a lot more than shopping sprees. She took out a credit card in your name and maxed it out. The paperwork's in your office drawer. I left him staring after me, his mouth hanging open. 3 weeks later, I was having coffee with my best friend Rochelle when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Derek. Patricia told me what you did. Thank you for showing me who my wife really was. Valencia cost me my marriage, but at least now I know the truth. Another text came in immediately after. This is Trevor. You saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life. I was about to propose to Valencia next week. I owe you dinner. I showed the messages to Rochelle, who nearly choked on her latte. You destroyed a criminal mastermind and saved 2 other men from being conned. You're like a superhero. I'm just someone who got tired of being lied to, I said. But privately, I felt proud of what I'd accomplished. For months, I'd let Brennan convince me that my instincts were wrong, that I was being paranoid and jealous. But I'd been right all along. And instead of just walking away, I'd gathered evidence and exposed the truth. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Meredith. Brennan's been a mess since you left. He found the credit card thing. She stole $47,000. He's pressing charges. Also, he wanted me to ask if you'd consider talking to him. I typed back quickly. Tell him I hope he learned something from this. But we're done. A month after the party, I ran into Patricia at the grocery store. She looked tired, but relieved. I wanted to thank you again, she said. Derek and I are getting divorced, but at least I know I'm not crazy. He'd been making me feel like I was imagining things for months. I know exactly how that feels, I said. Valencia pleaded guilty to avoid trial. She got 3 years. Apparently you weren't her first victims. She'd been running this same con in other cities. I felt a chill run down my spine. How many other women went through what I did? The prosecutor said at least a dozen over the past 5 years. You're the first one who fought back smart enough to take her down. Walking home from the store, I thought about all the women who'd been manipulated by Valencia, all the men who'd been conned, all the relationships that had been destroyed by her lies. How many people had been gaslighted into questioning their own sanity? That night, I created a blog called Trust Your Instincts. I wrote about my experience with Valencia and Brennan, offering advice for people who suspected they were being manipulated or gaslighted. Within a week, it had thousands of views and dozens of comments from people sharing similar stories. My boyfriend said I was paranoid about his female friend, but she was living in his apartment while I was at work. I thought I was going crazy when money kept disappearing from our joint account. My husband's work trips were actually weekends with his ex-wife. The blog grew into a support community. I started hosting monthly meetups for people who'd survived manipulation and gaslighting. We shared stories, offered advice, and celebrated victories, big and small. 6 months after the party, I was featured in a local magazine article about online activism. The reporter asked what motivated me to keep sharing my story. Nobody should have to question their own reality, I said. When someone you love makes you feel crazy for trusting your instincts, that's not love, that's abuse. And the more we talk about it, the harder it becomes for predators to isolate their victims. The article mentioned my blog, and traffic spiked again. I started getting emails from women across the country, and eventually from other countries. A woman in Australia had exposed her husband's affair using my tactics. A college student in Canada had escaped an abusive relationship after reading my story. One email stood out. My name is Destiny, and I'm a private investigator in Phoenix. I've been following your blog, and I think you'd make an excellent PI. Have you ever considered it as a career? We need people who think like you do. I'd been working as a marketing coordinator for a nonprofit, but the idea intrigued me. I'd always been good at research and connecting dots. And my experience with Valencia had taught me how to gather evidence systematically and think several steps ahead. I enrolled in a private investigation certification program and finished it in 8 months. Destiny offered me a position at her firm, specializing in infidelity and fraud cases. My first case was similar to my own situation, a woman named Phoenix who suspected her fiancé was cheating with his personal trainer. Within 2 weeks, I'd documented their affair and uncovered that the trainer was also scamming 3 other clients, convincing them to invest in her fake fitness studio business. How did you figure it out so fast? Phoenix asked when I presented my evidence. I know how predators think, I said. They usually have multiple victims and similar patterns. Once you identify the pattern, you can predict their next moves. The personal trainer was arrested for fraud. Phoenix called off her engagement and later thanked me for saving her from a lifetime of deception. Case after case, I helped people uncover the truth about their relationships. A husband who was funneling money to his gambling addiction while blaming his wife for their financial problems. A woman who was catfishing multiple men online, including a widower who'd given her his entire life savings. A business partner who was embezzling from their joint venture while gaslighting his partner about the missing money. Each victory felt like justice for my younger self, the woman who'd been made to feel crazy for trusting her instincts about Valencia. 1 year after the party, I got an unexpected phone call. Is this the woman who exposed Valencia Winters? The voice was unfamiliar. Yes, who's asking? My name is Dr. Quinton Barnes. I'm a forensic psychologist, and I've been studying Valencia's case for a research project on serial manipulation. Would you be willing to be interviewed? Dr. Barnes explained that Valencia represented a particularly sophisticated type of sociopath, someone who could maintain multiple complex deceptions simultaneously while making her victims doubt their own perception. Most people in your situation would have simply left the relationship, he said during our interview. What made you decide to gather evidence instead? I needed to prove to myself that I wasn't losing my mind, I said. But once I started uncovering how extensive her deceptions were, I realized this was bigger than just my relationship. She was destroying multiple lives. Your methodical approach was remarkable. You essentially built a criminal case without any formal training. I had motivation, I said. When someone tries to convince you that your reality isn't real, you either break down or you fight back. I chose to fight back. Dr. Barnes included my story in his research paper about manipulation tactics and victim responses. The paper was published in a peer-reviewed journal and cited in other academic works about psychological abuse. I never heard from Brennan directly, but Meredith occasionally updated me. He'd gone to therapy and was slowly rebuilding his life. The credit card fraud and identity theft charges against Valencia had resulted in additional jail time. She'd be in prison for at least 5 more years. He asks about you sometimes, Meredith told me during one of our coffee dates. I think he finally understands what he lost. I hope he learned something, I said. But I'm glad we ended things when we did. I deserved better than someone who would choose to gaslight me instead of examining his own behavior. You definitely deserved better. And from what I see on your social media, you're thriving without him. She was right. My PI business was growing. My blog had become a resource center with thousands of regular readers. I'd started dating again, a fellow investigator named River who understood the importance of honesty and communication. River had read my blog before we met, which could have been awkward, but instead it created a foundation of openness between us. He knew my history and respected my boundaries. When I had moments of anxiety about trusting someone new, he was patient and understanding. Your experience made you stronger, he said one evening as we watched the sunset from his apartment balcony. But it also made you wise. You know red flags when you see them now. Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever fully trust someone again, I admitted. Trust isn't about being naive, River said. It's about choosing to be vulnerable with someone who's earned that vulnerability. You don't have to trust blindly anymore. You can trust smartly. 2 years after the party, I received an unexpected visitor at my office. A young woman named Sage, maybe 22, sat across from my desk looking nervous and exhausted. I read your blog, she said. I think I'm in a situation like yours was. Sage's story was heartbreakingly familiar. Her boyfriend Kingston was gaslighting her about his relationship with his friend Emerald. Every time Sage raised concerns, Kingston accused her of being insecure and controlling. But Sage had noticed inconsistencies in his stories, unexplained absences, and changes in his behavior. I feel like I'm losing my mind, Sage said, tears streaming down her face. He makes everything sound reasonable when he explains it, but something still feels wrong. Trust that feeling, I said firmly. Your instincts are trying to protect you. I took Sage's case pro bono and put my full investigative skills to work. Within a week, I'd uncovered evidence that Kingston wasn't just cheating with Emerald. He was engaged to her. They'd been planning a wedding while he strung Sage along as his side relationship. But it got worse. Kingston was also married to a woman in another state. He was essentially a bigamist who used social media and dating apps to maintain multiple serious relationships across different geographical areas. When I presented the evidence to Sage, she sat in stunned silence for several minutes. How do people like this exist? She finally asked. They exist because they're good at finding people who want to believe in love, I said. There's nothing wrong with wanting to trust someone. The problem is entirely with people who abuse that trust. Sage confronted Kingston with the evidence, and his reaction was predictably manipulative. He accused her of stalking him, claimed the evidence was fabricated, and tried to convince her that I was a bitter woman who wanted to destroy other people's relationships. But Sage had learned to trust her instincts. She ended the relationship and filed a police report for fraud, since Kingston had been using her credit cards to pay for his dates with other women. Thank you for showing me I wasn't crazy, Sage said when the case was closed. I don't know what would have happened if I'd stayed with him. You would have figured it out eventually, I said. Strong people always do. I just helped speed up the process. Sage became a regular reader of my blog and eventually started her own support group for young women who'd survived manipulative relationships. Seeing her transformation from victim to advocate reminded me why this work mattered. 3 years after Valencia's arrest, I received a letter in my office mailbox. The return address was a federal correctional facility. My hands shook as I opened it. Dear investigator, you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need to say something. I've been in therapy for 2 years now, working on understanding why I did what I did. My therapist says I need to take accountability for the harm I caused. I destroyed your relationship and made you question your sanity. I stole from you and planned to humiliate you at what should have been one of the happiest moments of your life. I manipulated multiple people simultaneously and felt no remorse about the damage I was causing. I know an apology can't undo what I did, but I want you to know that watching you expose my lies taught me something important. Eventually, the truth always comes out. People who abuse others' trust will eventually face consequences. I'm glad you fought back. I'm glad you were smart enough to gather evidence. I'm glad you saved other people from going through what you went through. I hope you found happiness and peace. Valencia, Carmen. I read the letter twice, then filed it away. Part of me appreciated that she'd taken responsibility for her actions, but a larger part of me knew that actions mattered more than words, and her actions had nearly destroyed multiple lives. That evening, I shared the letter with River over dinner. How do you feel about it? He asked. Oddly grateful, I said. Not grateful to her, but grateful for everything that experience taught me. If she hadn't manipulated me, I might never have discovered my investigative abilities. I might never have started the blog or changed careers. In a weird way, her betrayal led me to my life's work. And to us, River pointed out. And to us, I agreed, smiling. We'd been together for over a year, and our relationship was built on the foundation of honesty that my experience with Brennan had taught me to demand. River shared everything with me, his work stress, his family drama, his fears and insecurities. In return, I was completely open about my past, my triggers, and my boundaries. I want to ask you something, River said, reaching across the table to take my hand. My heart skipped, but not with anxiety, with anticipation. He pulled out a small black box and opened it, revealing a simple but beautiful solitaire diamond ring. Will you marry me? He asked. Not because we've been together for a certain amount of time, or because it's what people expect, but because I can't imagine building a life with anyone else. Because you're the strongest, smartest, most honest person I know. Because you taught me that love should make you feel more like yourself, not less. I looked at the ring, a real diamond this time, chosen by a man who loved me enough to be completely honest with me. Yes, I said without hesitation. As he slipped the ring onto my finger, I thought about the fake engagement ring Valencia had stolen, and how devastated I'd been to discover Brennan's deception. That pain had felt like the end of the world at the time, but it had actually been the beginning of my real life. 6 months later, River and I had a small wedding in his family's backyard. Meredith attended and gave a speech about how proud she was of the woman I'd become. 4 years ago, my brother made the worst mistake of his life, she said, raising her champagne glass. But his loss became all of our gain, because it brought this incredible woman into our lives. She taught our family that strength isn't about avoiding difficult situations. It's about facing them with integrity and courage. During the reception, I received a text from Sage. Congratulations! Your story gave me hope that real love was possible. Thank you for showing me what healthy relationships look like. More messages poured in from women who'd found my blog over the years. You taught me to trust my instincts. You showed me that I deserved better. You proved that fighting back is always worth it. You helped me escape before it was too late. As I read each message, I realized that Valencia's manipulation had created a ripple effect that extended far beyond my own life. By sharing my story and refusing to stay silent, I'd helped countless women avoid similar situations or escape them more quickly. The manipulation that was meant to isolate and weaken me had instead connected me to a community of survivors who supported each other and refused to be victimized. 5 years after the party that changed everything, I was featured as a keynote speaker at a national conference on domestic violence prevention. My speech was titled, Gaslighting and the Courage to Trust Yourself. Standing at the podium, looking out at an audience of hundreds of counselors, law enforcement officers, and survivors, I thought about the woman I'd been before that night, someone who'd been made to feel crazy for trusting her instincts about a relationship. Gaslighting isn't just about lying, I told the audience. It's about making victims doubt their ability to perceive reality accurately. It's psychological warfare designed to make strong people feel helpless. I clicked to my first slide, a photo of the Bluetooth speaker I'd used to play Valencia's voice messages. But when we fight back strategically, when we document evidence and refuse to be silenced, we don't just save ourselves. We save everyone who comes after us. The audience gave me a standing ovation, but the moment that meant the most came afterward, when a young woman approached me during the networking reception. My name is Kennedy, she said. 6 months ago, I was in a situation like yours. I read your blog and started documenting everything. Last week, I exposed my boyfriend's affair with my best friend at their engagement party. How do you feel? I asked. Free, Kennedy said without hesitation. For the first time in 2 years, I feel completely free. That night, I added Kennedy's story to my blog, along with dozens of others from women who'd found the courage to trust their instincts and fight back against manipulation. The comment section filled with messages of support and similar stories. Women from around the world shared their experiences and offered advice to others in similar situations. This community saved my life, one commenter wrote. I thought I was the only one going through this, wrote another. You all gave me the strength to leave, wrote a third. Reading those comments, I thought about how Valencia's attempt to isolate and control me had backfired spectacularly. Instead of making me weak and dependent, her manipulation had made me stronger and more connected to other survivors than I'd ever imagined possible. 10 years later, I was running my own private investigation firm with 12 employees, all women who specialized in fraud and infidelity cases. My blog had become a full website with resources, support groups, and legal referrals. I'd written a book about manipulation tactics and recovery that had become a bestseller. But the moment that brought everything full circle came when I received a call from a familiar voice. This is Detective Morrison with the Fraud Division, the caller said. We have a suspect in custody who's been running a similar scam to the Valencia Winters case. She's claiming to be a victim herself, but we think she might be a copycat. Would you be willing to consult on the case? The suspect's name was Crystal, and her method was almost identical to Valencia's. Multiple boyfriends across different social media platforms, fake identities, stolen credit cards, and elaborate lies designed to extract money and gifts from her victims. But Crystal had made one crucial mistake. She'd targeted a woman whose sister had read my blog. The victim's sister recognized the pattern immediately, Detective Morrison explained. She helped her sister document everything and contact us. We arrested Crystal before she could disappear like these scammers usually do. I agreed to consult on the case, and within a week, we'd identified 7 other victims across 4 states. Crystal had stolen over $200,000 and destroyed multiple relationships with her web of lies. During the investigation, I discovered that Crystal had actually studied Valencia's case, reading court documents and news articles to refine her own scamming techniques. She'd seen Valencia as a role model rather than a cautionary tale. She thought Valencia's only mistake was getting caught. Detective Morrison said. She didn't understand that Valencia's real mistake was underestimating her victims. Crystal's trial became a media sensation, and I was called as an expert witness to explain manipulation tactics and their psychological impact on victims. During my testimony, I looked directly at Crystal and saw something familiar in her eyes. The same calculating coldness that Valencia had shown the night she walked into Brennan's apartment wearing my engagement ring. But this time, I wasn't a victim. I was an expert, helping to ensure that Crystal faced consequences for her crimes. Crystal was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. During her sentencing hearing, the judge made a statement that stayed with me. Cases like this remind us that the internet age has created new opportunities for predators, but it's also created new opportunities for victims to connect, share information, and fight back. The victim impact statements in this case show the power of community and the importance of trusting our instincts when something feels wrong. After the trial, I updated my blog with Crystal's story and the lessons learned from her case. The post received thousands of shares and hundreds of comments from people who'd recognized similar red flags in their own relationships. "You probably saved my life," one commenter wrote. "I was about to give my boyfriend my credit card information, but your post made me pause and investigate first. Turns out he's been scamming women online for years." "I showed your blog to my daughter," wrote another. "She broke up with her manipulative boyfriend the next day." Reading those comments, I reflected on how my experience with Valencia had created a cascade of protection for other women. Every story shared, every red flag identified, every manipulation tactic exposed, made it harder for predators to find victims. That evening, River found me at my computer, updating the website with new resources for fraud victims. "You know what I love most about you?" he said, wrapping his arms around me from behind. "What's that?" "You turned your worst experience into your greatest strength, and then you used that strength to protect thousands of other people." I leaned back against him, thinking about the woman I'd been 10 years ago. Someone who'd been made to feel crazy for trusting her instincts about a cheating boyfriend. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I just walked away that night instead of exposing Valencia," I said. "She would have kept destroying lives," River said simply. "Brennan would have married her, and she would have moved on to her next mark. Crystal might never have been caught. Hundreds of women would still think they were going crazy instead of knowing they were being manipulated." He was right. By refusing to be silenced, by gathering evidence and fighting back strategically, I'd helped create a world where manipulation was harder to hide and survivors had resources to heal and protect themselves. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Thank you for your blog. It gave me the courage to trust my instincts and leave an abusive marriage. 6 months later, I'm free and happy. You saved my life." I smiled and saved the message in my victories folder, a collection of hundreds of similar texts and emails from women who'd found strength in shared stories and community support. Valencia had tried to convince me that I was paranoid and unstable. Instead, she'd accidentally created a fraud expert and advocate who'd spent a decade helping other women avoid similar traps. Some people might call that ironic. I called it justice. As I finished updating the website, I thought about the young woman I'd been before that devastating night when I'd played Valencia's voice messages at Brennan's party. She'd been naive and trusting, willing to doubt herself rather than face uncomfortable truths. But she'd also been strong enough to document evidence, brave enough to confront her betrayers, and smart enough to turn her pain into purpose. The woman I was now, confident, successful, surrounded by love and community, had been shaped by that experience but not defined by it. I'd taken Valencia's attempt to destroy me and transformed it into a platform to protect others. Looking back, I could honestly say that the worst night of my life had led to the best years of my life. Not because the betrayal itself was good, but because of how I'd chosen to respond to it. And every day, through my work and my advocacy, I got to help other women make the same choice. To trust their instincts, document the truth, and refuse to be silenced by people who wanted to manipulate them. That was Valencia's real legacy. Not the lies she told or the lives she temporarily disrupted, but the community of strong, connected women who'd learned from her tactics and dedicated themselves to protecting each other. The last thing I did before going to bed that night was post a new message on the blog. Trust your instincts. Document everything. You're not crazy, you're not paranoid, and you're not alone. When someone tries to convince you that your reality isn't real, that's when you know you're on to something important. Don't let them make you doubt yourself. Fight back smart, fight back strategic, and know that there's an entire community of survivors who have your back. Within an hour, the post had dozens of likes and several comments from women sharing their own stories of trusting their instincts and discovering uncomfortable truths. The conversation continued, the community grew stronger, and somewhere out there, another woman found the courage to trust herself instead of the person trying to manipulate her. That was Valencia's unintended gift to the world, proof that when predators underestimate their victims, they often create their own worst enemies. And I was proud to be Valencia's worst enemy, protecting others from suffering what I'd survived and thrived beyond. Plotted story continuation, targeting 22,000-word narrative goal. Let me count the words to see how close I am to 22,000. I need to count approximately since I can't count exactly while writing, but I need to make sure I hit close to the target. Looking at what I've written, I estimate I'm at around 17,000, 18,000 words. I need to continue for several more thousand words to reach the 22,000-word target. I should continue developing the story with more cases, more impact from the blog, perhaps a larger business expansion, maybe some interaction with Valencia after her release, and continue showing the long-term impact of the narrator's decision to fight back. I should maintain the author's style throughout. 15 years after that night, I was preparing for my appearance on a national morning show to discuss my new book, The Manipulation Manual: How Predators Think and How Survivors Fight Back. The book had spent 6 weeks on the bestseller list and had been optioned for a documentary series. But the moment that reminded me why this work mattered came the evening before my TV appearance, when I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Is this the woman who exposed Valencia Winters?" The voice was young, shaky. "Yes, this is Aspen. Who's calling?" "My name is Harper. I'm Valencia's daughter." My blood ran cold. I hadn't known Valencia had a child. "She got out of prison last month," Harper continued. "She's been trying to contact you, but your office said you don't take calls from former subjects of investigation." "That's correct," I said carefully. "What can I do for you, Harper?" "I'm 23 now. I was in foster care while she was in prison. I've been reading about what she did to you and other people, and I wanted to apologize." "Harper, you don't need to apologize for your mother's actions. But I do need to warn you, she's not better. Prison didn't change her. If anything, it made her angrier. She blames you for ruining her life." My stomach clenched. What kind of warning are we talking about? "She's been creating fake social media accounts to stalk you and your business. She knows where you live, where you work, details about your husband. She's obsessed with proving that you're somehow worse than she is." I thanked Harper for the warning and immediately called Detective Morrison, who was now a lieutenant in the Cybercrimes Division. "We'll look into it," he promised. "Valencia's parole conditions include no contact with her victims and restricted internet access. If she's violating those terms, we can get her arrested again." Within 48 hours, the police had identified 3 fake social media accounts Valencia was using to monitor my activities. She'd been screenshotting my posts, collecting photos of my house and office, and had even created a fake profile to try to join my online support groups. But she'd made the same mistake she'd made 15 years earlier, underestimating how prepared I was. My security system included cameras, motion sensors, and direct connection to a monitoring service. My office building had similar protections. I'd learned from my work with other stalking victims to take precautions that most people never considered necessary. More importantly, I had something Valencia could never understand: a genuine community of people who cared about my safety and well-being. The morning of my TV appearance, River drove me to the studio while 2 security guards, both women I'd helped train in threat assessment, followed in a separate car. "Are you nervous about the show or about Valencia?" River asked as we pulled into the studio parking lot. "Neither," I said honestly. "Valencia spent 15 years in prison because she underestimated me once. If she wants to try again, she'll learn the same lesson." The TV interview went perfectly. The host asked about my background, my investigative methods, and my advice for people who suspected they were being manipulated. "The most important thing is to trust your instincts," I told the audience. "If someone is making you feel crazy for noticing inconsistencies in their behavior, that's usually because there are inconsistencies to notice." During the commercial break, my phone buzzed with a text from Detective Morrison. "Valencia arrested an hour ago for parole violation. She was found with a detailed plan to disrupt your TV appearance. She's going back to prison." I smiled and shared the news with River, who was waiting in the green room. "So that's over?" he asked. "That chapter is over," I corrected. "But the work continues." And it did continue. The TV appearance generated thousands of new visitors to my website and dozens of new clients for my investigation firm. Women from across the country reached out with stories of manipulation, fraud, and gaslighting. One case that particularly resonated with me involved a woman named Dakota, whose husband had been conducting an elaborate financial fraud for 3 years. He'd convinced her that their money problems were due to her irresponsible spending, while secretly funneling their savings into cryptocurrency schemes and gambling debts. "He made me keep receipts for every purchase," Dakota told me during our first meeting, "even a cup of coffee. Then he'd lecture me about fiscal responsibility while our accounts were mysteriously empty." Dakota's husband had been using classic gaslighting techniques, making her doubt her memory of financial transactions, blame herself for problems he was creating, and feel too confused and ashamed to seek outside help. But Dakota had started documenting everything, inspired by my blog posts about evidence gathering. "I felt like I was investigating my own life," she said. "But it was the only way to prove to myself that I wasn't losing my mind." Within 2 weeks, I'd helped Dakota uncover the full extent of her husband's financial crimes. He'd stolen over $300,000 from their joint accounts, taken out credit cards in her name, and had been planning to declare bankruptcy while hiding assets in offshore accounts. "How did you learn to do this?" Dakota asked as we reviewed the evidence. "From someone who tried to make me doubt my own sanity," I said. "She taught me that the best defense against manipulation is meticulous documentation and refusal to be silenced." Dakota's husband was arrested for fraud and identity theft. During his trial, the prosecutor used my investigative methods as a model for how civilians could gather evidence of financial crimes. The defendant assumed his victim would never fight back smart, the prosecutor told the jury. He was wrong. Dakota's case became a template for my firm's financial fraud investigations. We developed a systematic approach to helping victims document economic abuse and manipulation, working with banks, credit agencies, and law enforcement to restore stolen funds and credit ratings. The success rate was remarkable. Over 90% of our financial fraud cases resulted in criminal charges and victim compensation. Word spread through legal networks, and soon we were consulting on cases across the country. But the victory that meant the most came 5 years later, when Dakota called to tell me she'd started her own financial advocacy nonprofit. "I help women who've been financially abused," she said. "I teach them your documentation methods and connect them with resources to rebuild their credit and financial independence." "How many women have you helped?" I asked. "Over 200 so far, and every one of them knows your story. You showed us that victims can become experts, and experts can become advocates." That call came on the 20th anniversary of Valencia's arrest. I was now 52 years old, running a team of 30 investigators, and had written 3 books about manipulation and fraud. My website had become the leading resource for information about psychological abuse, with over 1 million yearly visitors. But the anniversary also brought unexpected news. Harper, Valencia's daughter, had become a criminal justice professor specializing in white-collar crime. She'd written her doctoral dissertation about her mother's case and its impact on fraud prevention. I wanted to understand how someone becomes the kind of person who destroys other people's lives, Harper told me during a phone interview for her research. But I also wanted to understand how victims become advocates. What did you discover? I asked. That trauma can either break people or make them unbreakable. You chose to become unbreakable, and then you taught thousands of other people to make the same choice. Harper's research had identified over 2,000 women who directly credited my blog with helping them escape manipulative relationships. She'd also tracked the ripple effect, women who'd helped friends and family members recognize red flags after learning about manipulation tactics from my resources. The conservative estimate is that your response to Valencia's manipulation has protected over 10,000 women from similar situations, Harper said. My mother destroyed a few dozen lives, but her victim turned that experience into a protection system for thousands. Your mother made one crucial mistake, I told Harper. She assumed that destroying me would benefit her. Instead, it created her most effective opponent. Harper laughed, a sound nothing like her mother's cold, calculating tones. She's still angry about that, Harper said. She'll be in prison for another 10 years, and she spends most of her time writing angry letters about how unfair it is that you became successful after exposing her. What's unfair is how many people she hurt, I replied. But what's fair is that those people found ways to protect themselves and each other. That evening, I updated my blog with a post reflecting on 20 years of advocacy work. 2 decades ago, a woman tried to convince me I was paranoid for trusting my instincts about her affair with my boyfriend. She planned to humiliate me at what should have been my engagement after stealing my ring and manipulating the man I loved. Instead of succeeding, she accidentally taught me the most valuable lesson of my life. When someone tries to make you doubt your reality, that's usually because your reality is threatening to their lies. The woman who tried to gaslight me is spending her life in prison. The boyfriend who chose to manipulate me instead of respecting me lost the best relationship he'll ever have. Meanwhile, the paranoid woman they tried to silence has spent 20 years helping thousands of people trust their instincts, document evidence, and fight back against manipulation. To everyone reading this who's being told they're crazy, paranoid, or oversensitive, you're not. You're seeing clearly. And that's exactly what manipulators fear most. Keep documenting. Keep fighting back smart. Keep trusting yourself. And know that there's an entire army of survivors who have your back. The post received over 10,000 likes within 24 hours and hundreds of comments from women sharing their own stories of trusting their instincts and discovering uncomfortable truths. But the comment that moved me most came from an unexpected source. This is Meredith, Brennan's sister. I've been following your work for 20 years, and I want you to know how proud I am of the woman you became. My brother lost the best thing that ever happened to him, but the world gained an incredible advocate. Thank you for turning your pain into protection for others. I smiled and typed back. Thank you for always believing in me, even when your brother didn't. Having your support during that difficult time meant more than you know. Within minutes, she replied, You gave me a template for recognizing manipulation in my own relationships. I've shared your story with my daughters, my friends, my colleagues. You probably don't realize how many people you've helped just by refusing to stay silent. That exchange reminded me why I'd started sharing my story in the first place. Not for revenge against Valencia or Brennan, but to help other women avoid the isolation and self-doubt that manipulation creates. 25 years later, at the age of 57, I was invited to give the keynote address at the International Conference on Domestic Violence Prevention. The theme was From Victim to Advocate, the Power of Transformed Trauma. Standing at the podium, looking out at an audience of survivors, researchers, law enforcement officers, and advocates from around the world, I thought about the woman I'd been before that life-changing night. She'd been someone who wanted to believe the best about people, even when evidence suggested otherwise. Someone who'd been willing to doubt herself rather than confront uncomfortable truths. But she'd also been someone with enough inner strength to document evidence, face betrayal head-on, and transform personal pain into public service. Valencia Winters taught me that predators count on their victims staying silent, I told the audience. They rely on shame, confusion, and isolation to keep their crimes hidden. They assume that people who've been manipulated will be too damaged to fight back effectively. I clicked to my next slide, a photo of the Bluetooth speaker I'd used 25 years earlier. But when we refuse to stay silent, when we share our stories and support each other, we create something predators never expect. An informed, connected community that makes manipulation much harder to hide. The final slide showed statistics from my website. Over 5 million visitors, 50,000 active community members, and documentation that my resources had directly helped over 25,000 people escape manipulative situations. Every woman who finds the courage to trust her instincts makes it easier for the next woman to do the same, I concluded. Every story shared makes predators' tactics more recognizable. Every survivor who becomes an advocate helps prevent future victims. The standing ovation lasted for several minutes, but the moment that meant the most came afterward, when a young woman approached me during the reception. My name is Phoenix, she said. 3 months ago, I found your blog when I was Googling whether I was going crazy. My boyfriend was gaslighting me about his relationship with his ex-wife. Your post taught me how to document evidence and trust my instincts. What happened? I asked. I discovered he was still married to her. They'd never actually divorced, which meant my entire relationship was a lie. But instead of falling apart, I gathered evidence and reported him for bigamy. Phoenix pulled out her phone and showed me a news article. Local man arrested for bigamy fraud. Multiple victims come forward. Reading your story gave me a roadmap for how to fight back smart, Phoenix continued. But more than that, It showed me that being betrayed doesn't have to define you. How you respond to betrayal is what matters. What are you doing now? I asked. I'm starting law school in the fall. I want to specialize in fraud prosecution. You showed me that victims can become the people who stop predators from finding new victims. Listening to Phoenix, I realized that my response to Valencia's manipulation had created something larger than I'd ever imagined. Not just a blog or a business or a community, but a philosophy. That trauma could be transformed into strength, that victims could become experts, and that personal pain could become public protection. Valencia had tried to isolate me, confuse me, and ultimately destroy me. Instead, she'd accidentally created a network of empowered women who protected each other and fought back against manipulation wherever they found it. That night, as River and I celebrated our 20th wedding anniversary with dinner at the same restaurant where he'd proposed, I reflected on how different my life might have been if I'd simply walked away from Brennan without exposing the truth. Do you ever regret it? River asked, as if reading my thoughts. The way everything unfolded that night? Never, I said without hesitation. That night showed me who I really was and what I was capable of. Everything good in my life, my career, my purpose, our marriage, the community we've built, it all grew from the decision to fight back instead of staying silent. Valencia probably thought she was destroying your life, River observed. She thought she was. But she actually gave me the most important gift anyone's ever given me, proof that I was stronger than I knew, and that my instincts were worth trusting. River raised his champagne glass. To Valencia Winters, the worst thing that ever happened to you and the reason you became the best version of yourself. I laughed and clinked my glass against his. To the woman who tried to gaslight me into silence and accidentally turned me into the person who'd spend the rest of her life making sure other women never have to doubt their own reality. As we drove home that evening, I thought about all the women who'd reached out over the years to share their stories of manipulation, gaslighting, and ultimate triumph. Each one had found strength in knowing she wasn't alone, wasn't crazy, and wasn't powerless. Valencia's attempt to convince me I was paranoid had backfired in the most spectacular way possible. She'd created exactly what she'd feared most. A woman who trusted her instincts completely and had the skills to expose lies wherever she found them. The next morning, I added one final post to my blog. 25 years ago today, I played voice messages at a party that changed my life forever. The woman who'd been gaslighting me for months was finally exposed, and I learned that my paranoia was actually clarity. To everyone who's ever been told they're overthinking, overreacting, or oversensitive, trust yourself. Your instincts exist to protect you, and anyone who wants you to ignore them probably has something to hide. Keep documenting, keep fighting back, keep supporting each other. And remember, the people who try to convince you that you're crazy are usually the ones who desperately need you to stop seeing clearly. Your reality is real. Your instincts are valid. Your voice matters. Never let anyone convince you otherwise. The post was shared thousands of times within hours, and the comments section filled with stories of women who trusted their instincts, discovered uncomfortable truths, and chose to fight back, rather than stay silent. But the message that moved me most came from an unexpected source. This is Detective Morrison, retired. I've been following your work since the Valencia Winters case. In my 30 years in law enforcement, I've never seen a victim transform personal trauma into such powerful advocacy. You've helped solve cases, prevented crimes, and saved lives. Thank you for refusing to be silenced. I smiled and typed back. Thank you for taking my evidence seriously all those years ago. Having law enforcement believe and support me made all the difference. That evening, as I closed my laptop and headed upstairs to join River, I passed the framed photo we kept on our hallway wall, a picture of me at the podium during my first speaking engagement 15 years earlier. The woman in that photo looked confident and determined, nothing like the confused, gaslit victim Valencia had tried to create, but that confident woman had always been there, even during the worst moments of manipulation and doubt. She'd just needed the right catalyst to emerge. Valencia Winters had intended to be my destruction. Instead, she'd been my catalyst. And every day, through my work and advocacy, I got to help other women discover their own strength, trust their own instincts, and refuse to let anyone convince them that their reality wasn't real. That was Valencia's unintended legacy. An army of women who'd learned from her tactics and dedicated themselves to making sure those tactics never worked on anyone else. The woman who'd tried to gaslight me into silence had accidentally created her own worst nightmare. A victim who became an expert, a survivor who became an advocate, and a voice that grew louder with every passing year. And I was just getting started.